Paul's arrived.
It's ready to go.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to declare the meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee on the 6th of August 2020 open. I'd like to welcome His Worship the Mayor, fellow councillors and colleagues and staff. Now, do we have any apologies?
Apology from Francois.
You'd move that apology?
I'd like to move that, yeah.
You would like to second? Thank you very much. Dick, oh, sorry, I'll just give you a moment. The elected members' interest register has been circulated. Is there any additions, amendments to the one that's been circulated that we would like to record? I'll take that as a no then, thank you. Urgent items that are not on the agenda. Has anybody got anything they would wish to add to the agenda as an urgent item which meets the requirements of section 46A? I do have one matter I would like to raise, and it's really just to signal it for the next meeting, but because it isn't on the agenda, it does need to come in as an urgent item, and that is that I think by our next committee meeting, it would be good to have an audit and risk committee meeting plan in place. So if everyone's comfortable with that, I'd like to, I know we can't move it as a resolution, but just have it noted that by next meeting, we will have an audit and risk plan in place, which will cover at least the next 12 months. Right, the minutes of the meeting of the 7th of May have been circulated. Has anyone got any additions, amendments with respect to those? In that case, I will move that the minutes be recorded, confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting of the 7th of May for the Audit and Risk Committee. Thank you. We now move to the action list. Is there any commentary or comment on the action list or update from staff, possibly, Leslie?
Yes, the first item obviously is we're bringing that committee work plan to the next meeting, as we've just discussed. We've been in contact with the Reserve Bank regarding the consultation on the cashless community, and there's no update on that at the moment. They had to stop the project due to the COVID lockdown, and that project hasn't yet resumed. Okay, thank you. And people here are probably also aware that there's considerable commentary around the removal of cheques from well, theoretically July of next year, but in practice in some of the regions the banks have already started to refuse accepting cheques, which has caused some interesting things with respect to people who pay their inland revenue bills and sundry other things by cheque. So that wouldn't have formed part of that consultation, but there was a consultation around that as well. There was. It's not changed for us. It's people can still use cheques with council facilities with our bank. They haven't changed. They're still accepting them and processing them. Okay, thank you.
What percentage of people pay?
I couldn't tell you offhand. We do get quite a lot of cheques in, but we have been pushing to go to automated payments and bank direct debits, and we have been making a lot of progress in that area. So we have been reducing quite a lot of cheque payments, but it's still a work in progress.
There's an organisation that I do some work for. We've just actually done the evaluation in terms of donations that come in by cheque and cash, and I think it was somewhere around the 5 or 6%, and quite a substantial amount of money that was still coming in. And there was also issues around people having to travel 70 kilometres to bank because of the the refusal to take cheques and so on.
Through the chair, older people, of course, more reliant on the cheques, but there's another reason to change banks from Kiwi Bank, because they're the ones that have stopped accepting cheques, just like they've stopped accepting customers with connection with coal.
I wasn't aware of that second matter.
No.
And I'm happy to move that the updated action list be received and accepted if I had a seconder. And we have no presentations. Do we?
Not today.
Sorry, excuse me, who was the seconder? Excuse me, Chair.
Jay. Oh, Bruce. I thought I saw you. Right, we'll move to the staff reports then, and we've got the financial report from the Group Manager of Corporate Services, but we'll also, Leslie's going to give us an update on the current situation with the Audit Office, and people may be aware that communications have been quite late coming out, so there was nothing out in time for the agenda, but given that we're going into, we're doing our annual report, annual plan, and going into the audit process, if we would do that, it'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Through you, Madam Chair. We've made a little bit of a change to the report this time, based on the fact that we're coming up to year end. Normally we would give you a quarterly report, but this one is for 2 months only. We're not in a position to give you the financial year end figures at this time because we're still working through the adjustments. So we thought the best next thing would be to provide you a quarterly report for 2 months. So I'll take it the report has been read, but the changes that we've made is to just take out most of the KPI information. With staff being very busy, to actually ask them to put that information together in 2 months is just not feasible. And we will be reporting on full in that in the annual report. The first item on that report is the sustainability report, and this gives a very good snapshot at the financial position of Council at the end of May. As you can see, we are ahead of budget on surplus deficit. That you'll find is really mainly because of the funding that we've received for capital projects that goes through our P&L. I think without that funding, we'd be probably looking at being more of around about 0 surplus deficit. This sustainability report gives a very good idea against our KPIs. So you can see from our rates to operating revenue, 62% of the operating revenue is rates. That is well within our finance and revenue policy, which states up to 78%. So we are currently well within that. Our balanced budget ratio, we are still balanced. A balanced budget means either 0 surplus deficit or slightly above that, slightly surplus. Our interest to rates revenue is still very good. We have a limit of 25% of our rates revenue, and we are well within that. A lot of that is to do with the fact that interest rates are so low at the moment. Interest to operating revenue is 2.52%, which is still very low compared to our limit of 10%. Liquidity risk, this is not only a council KPI, it's a local government funding agency KPI. We should maintain at least 110%. At the current time, we are 140.9%, so well within our liquidity. This is a good sign for council. It's good, healthy balance. Essential services ratio. This basically states that we're spending more on capital than we are actually claiming in depreciation funding. So this has been increasing well over the last few months. We have a graph there that just gives you a little visual picture of that statement. So we are forecasting that we will, with all our adjustments going in, that we will be around about 1 million in surplus. However, we are still trying to determine the effects of COVID on our rates revenue. At the moment, that hasn't shown to be too problematic. We've had deferrals on our rates. We haven't actually had any bad debts on our rates at this point. That is likely to change in future months. I think the worst is yet to come on that side. But at the present time, we've just got deferrals, so people will be paying for their rates over a longer period. So we do also have some details here about all our line items within the statement, so it's a little bit more detailed for you. I'll answer any questions afterwards, or if you've got one you want to interrupt with, that's fine. Our statement of financial position looks good. Our debtors and cash is in a better position. We've got more cash than we thought we would, and that's probably to do with the funding that we've received, and also our debtors is quite low. So then we have our capital expenditure report. We are behind on our capital expenditure. We always have forecast for at least 6 months of this the last financial year that we wouldn't meet all our expenditure there. And that's fair enough, because we haven't had very good asset information in the past. And really it's been problematic in knowing what projects we actually need to carry out. And I think we've erred on the side of putting projects in case we needed to do them. Whereas now we've got better asset information going forward for our long-term plan, we'll be able to plan those projects properly, and they'll be we'll be able to put them through in a manner that we'll be able to meet, being able to complete them.
Through the chair, sorry Leslie, just a point of note regarding talking about stormwater project. We have, it says only 3% of actually the spending. We've done some major works in the last 2 months of the year, which won't show in this report. So Tancred Street pump upgrade and line works has gone in. That's quite a large project of that piece of work.
That's all right.
About what value that work?
The 400K mark.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, through the chair. Yeah, it's sort of around the 400K mark, and there was a major delay in the pump supply, which is a significant part of that cost due to COVID. That pump has just been installed 2 weeks ago, so that cost will start to flow through.
I think it's fair to say that COVID has impacted the work we could do as well. So we can't take that out of the equation either. So then we have an update on our Treasury management. So this gives a picture of our loan funding at the moment. We are well within policy. So the first graph under loans shows you the spread of our loan over the years, and also any available loan funding that we have. And this is managed on a monthly basis with Treasury calls with our advisors. We also hedge our interest rates, our interest position, and we've recently taken a new forward start for our hedging, and that was agreed by Madam Chair, which will put us in a better position with our interest rate management going forward and keep us within policy for our liability management policy and our investment policy. As you can see from all of those graphs, we are in policy throughout. So then we have an update on our debtors. And as you can see, sundry debtors is quite low compared to this time last year, but that was just due to timing on an invoice that had actually been raised just before the year end and hadn't quite been paid. Our rates debtors shows what we've been discussing. We are making a lot of progress on getting that debt down, but COVID, with the delay and the processes we put in place there to help the community with their rates, it is showing a higher balance than we would have hoped we would have had at this time of year. But that is being managed. I think our debt collection, the table later, as you see below that, that's looking really good. We are actually getting some really good recovery rates there, so we are working very hard with our debt management as well. Take any questions?
Page 36, interest rate disposition. So you said it's within policy, but to me that graph looks like the forecast is above policy. Excellent. Am I reading that wrong?
So we have to review the policy every few years, and we also have to work on what our long-term plan debt position will look like. And it's reviewed every time. The problem we have is if we don't have a set capital plan and we don't know what our forecast is. And that's been one of the issues we've had going forward, as we said, about not having the asset information available to be able to plan our projects properly. So what we have at the moment is certainly in policy for the next 10 years. We've just had a call with our Treasury advisors, and we are actually within policy there. So that will be reviewed several times before then.
Further questions from the committee?
Yes, through the chair, the rates deferrals, obviously, are they mainly businesses or residential?
Sorry, the
Rates deferrals.
rates deferrals is mainly commercial.
What sort of percentage are we looking at those?
I can't tell you a percentage, but we've got about 500k worth of deferrals.
They spread throughout the district?
Throughout the district, not just here, throughout the district.
I'm thinking of the basics for.
Yeah, there as well.
So the connection code.
Yes,
There's no size of that, isn't there?
yes,
Increase.
yeah.
I have one question on recovery. I don't have a page number on mine, sorry, so I can't quite run it. But where it refers to the variance or the amount being lower than planned, as you now use, there's now in-house people providing the services, which were previously outsourced and recovered from customers. And I wondered why, given that they're still getting the same service, we're no longer doing recovery from customers.
Yeah, I think the actual comment is misleading. The way I did bring that up with the finance team, and I think what they're trying to say is that because we are, what was it? What about? It doesn't mean that we're not getting that revenue back. It just means that we are actually, it's lower because consultants cost more.
Oh, gotcha.
And contractors cost more.
Yeah. So it's still cost recovery, just
yes.
Or zero
yeah.
out, so to speak. Okay, thank you. And I just wondered if, I know there's the government who are allegedly putting up another 761 million to help with the three waters. I just wondered if there was any, and that's quite recent, as everyone here will always know. If you could just give us a little background on that, as to where we stand with that, if at all.
Yes, so I'm happy to answer that question. So there's a number of aspects to that fund. First of all, council have to sign on to MOU by the 31st of August, actually allocate that fund allocated. There's a formula being derived which sees that 50% of that fund comes directly to the district, and 50% of it goes to a regional pool, which then gets divvied up once 2/3 of the district sign up with MOUs. So there's a bit of a carrot and egg in this space. Based on the numbers that we've received, is 3.43 million comes directly to council if we sign up on the MOU. So we haven't prejudged this right now. So we've got a report being developed for council just deliberation on the 27th of August. We've already started work some time ago with looking at future models based on what the government's proposing. So the West Coast councils are working on what does the West Coast model look like. We've combined with Canterbury districts to look at a Canterbury, Tasman, West Coast model. There is a feeling that that's likely to be follow the rugby, the franchises, how it will be split up as potentially a Canterbury-like model. The other option for the South Island, because a lot of it determines on the size of the benefits. To get those quantifiable benefits, there has to be so many users that can benefit. So that the number of 1 million people is the optimum to leverage this. And that means the whole of the South Island in one model. But there's a number of nuances in this tranche one of the funding, which is the 761, there is no legal binding requirements for council to do anything with the assets other than to share information. Tranche two is where it becomes a legal binding model. There's obviously quite a bit of work to be done before they quantify what that looks like and how it will be managed. So we have a council report coming at the end of August to actually provide a direction for council to make a deliberation on.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for the update.
Just regards to the fund itself, so there's caveats that come with it in terms of what it can be spent for. It can cover both capital and operating costs, but it can't be used to pay for projects within your annual plan because they're assuming that's already funded, unless you've made applications for shovel-ready projects for those Three Waters projects. Fortunately, we actually have applied for this year's shovel-ready projects for all of our Three Waters delivery. So we've got a number of options how we could utilise that fund. Obviously, it's going to be significant for the ratepayers, utilising extra money that not going to have to fork out and get recovered in rates. This is a grant, by the way, as well.
So with the shovel-ready projects, are there any, I know there's already some that have been awarded, are there any still in the pipeline?
None have been awarded today across New Zealand. So there's no contracts being signed.
Sorry, so I had a wee note here from that you had.
We've been announced, but they haven't actually been.
Oh, okay. Right. My apologies for my wording.
So that's a lot of upfront announcements, but yet to get a contract for council to sign. So we have been successful in a number of projects. We haven't had any shovel-ready projects. The projects we applied for have been reallocated to PGF, so they will be successful in the PGF bucket of money. Yeah, looking forward to getting those contracts in front of us so we can actually activate them.
Thank you. You said it's a bit confusing between shovel-ready and provisional, provincial growth and jobs for nature and a whole range of other things that are working their way through the system. Thank you. Has anyone else got any matters they wish to raise with respect to the finance report?
Just one question on Simon, what you were just saying. Have you spoken to Grade and Bonnet, and are they?
Oh yeah, so we're working closely with Grade.
Working, and they're all keen.
So we've actually got a consultant, Tonkin and Taylor, working on what does a West Coast model look like. So each council has funded that process, and we're working. We've had a couple of workshops already, and Tonkin and Taylor actually presenting mayors and chairs on Monday, next Wednesday, in terms of current status. So we hope to have this finalised in a couple of months. Have it actually locked down. We'll report back to council in future.
Through you, Madam Chair, Paula has already signed the commitment to enter. Gray's considering it, we're considering it. And if you use the formulas that are in the report that's been given to us, it virtually doubles the initial amount that the Chief Executive's talked about. So it's quite a big hunk of money.
So the recommendation from Department of Internal Affairs is the same formula as used for the regional allocation. So if we consider that, it's basically double what your district's been allocated, because they believe it's actually the most fairest model to use. We hope that the other two districts agree.
Thank you. If no one else has got any questions they wish to ask, I would like to move that we receive the financial report to May 2020. I have a seconder. Thank you. And I would now like to move that we move into the public excluded section of the meeting.
Would you like me to give that update on the Auditor General?
Oh, I beg your pardon, yes, sorry.
So since this agenda was written, we've had the audit plan and documents for our year-end audit from Audit come through, and His Worship the Mayor has signed them and we've returned them. Basically, this tells how they're going to carry out the audit, what the basis is for the charging of that audit, and it also gives the audit team names, members, and what level of auditor they are, such as an audit manager or the qualified staff and not qualified staff that they'll be using. And this is the fees that they're charging are going to be based on the actuals from the previous year and the budget that they had in place for the previous year. So the 2019 budget was 747 hours, but they actually carried out 1,205 hours on our audit. So they're planning to carry out 797 for this year. So it's a small increase. They didn't actually pass on all those charges last year, so that's why they've increased the hours for this year. So they've also given a plan as to what they will be looking at particularly. So sensitive expenditure is one item, asset valuations and fair value assessments, the rates, non-financial reporting, so that's our KPIs. And the proposed audit fees will be 174,915,000, and that is up by 3,000, nearly 4,000 on last year.
Through you, Madam Chair. Looking ahead and looking at the money that's been allocated from government, or being allocated, it looks to me like the expenditure of council is going to rise by $10 or $15 million in this coming year. Do you have the resources? How are you going to handle it?
As in,
I'm thinking I'm talking about financial.
the financials.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the problem we have is timing, and with us not having a lot of cash reserves, what I'd like to see is from the project, because there will be a project manager and that's already built into that cost. Mm-hmm. So what I would like to see is that any spend, any progress payments that we can actually invoice for and get money back for, that we do that in a timely fashion, so that we're not spending lots of money and then having to wait months to get that refunded to us. So we really need the financial side of the project management being really a high priority item.
And are you staffed adequately to be able to handle that? Because it seems like it's going to treble what we spent last year.
So I believe the financial management side of those projects is being managed by the project managers that are going to be engaged to do those projects.
This is true, Madam Chair. What we're looking to do, Your Worship, is set up a PMO, a project management office, to run these projects. So we've already allocated, we're looking to allocate a project manager, and they will bring the resources that are required to make sure we actually have those. The other thing that we've been endeavouring to do for some time is actually find a new manager, or find a management accountant, which will support district assets as well, around obviously capital programming and budgeting and cash flow forecasting, all those sort of things. So there's quite a huge, like I say, a huge task to manage the project invoicing and to ensure that we're actually getting all of this cash flow coming through in the right time, and everyone getting paid correctly as well.
We certainly, the ship's running very well, and I'd hate to see it wobble due to this wave of projects and cash.
It certainly it sounds really good to get all this funding, but it certainly is a challenge as well, because we are still managing that with the same staffing levels. But that's why we did build in a project management for that, to be able to manage those as well.
Could I ask through the chair if the project management is going to be in-house rather than consultants?
Through the chair, unfortunately, if you have in-house project management, you aren't allowed to charge for that. So it comes as in-kind to the project. We can't actually differentiate that. We've tried on a number of different projects previously. So it seems strange, but project management has to be an actually invoice piece of work. So don't tell me why that is, but it is the way it is.
Hobble for the rules.
Yeah, but we have identified and actually starting to work with a very, very good project manager, and what I would deem as his rates are not exorbitant. In fact, he's very experienced at a very good price.
I'd like a consultant that doesn't have exorbitant rates.
bit of integrity.
Just clarifying that for my benefit then, that because the funding will not allow for in-house support to do the project management role, we've actually got to go outside of council to contract in someone to do the project management so that government funding will support it.
To claim the money back.
Yeah, to claim the money back, yes, to make it a...
So if we set up an internal, if we dedicated staff to do this, the in-kind component is not, can't be charged. It's purely seen as staff hours. You can't recharge staff hours to projects.
Thank you for that clarification of...
On West Coast.
Something like this. Some small consolation.
In the report from the Audit Office, have they talked at all about auditing things specific to COVID-19, additional work in relation to that kind of thing?
So yes, they have talked about a scope of work around that, around the COVID-19 pandemic. It's basically including the result of the effects. So they're going to be discussing things such as issues and potential recovery of costs. And they've also, and it's come from the Office of the Auditor General, there's something like a 13-page document that we've been provided with that we need to go through and answer questions on about all forms of, all areas of council which may have been impacted. So we have to complete this for audit, and they will be auditing that and looking at that when they actually come and complete the audit.
Okay. So just reflecting on what's been said around the table about the workloads on the finance team amongst others, and we get a very comprehensive and absolutely excellent and much appreciated by me financial report to the Audit and Risk Committee, but I am wondering if we could perhaps discuss a kind of a compromise position whereby we don't get the detail every quarter, but we go more of an exception-based, and we'd have to set the parameters to what the exception would need to be reported to reduce the workload on the finance team for this particular report. Now, it's just an idea, and I've only just had it, so I just wondered what your thinking would be around reducing the amount of detail, but maintaining the, what I call the exceptions, and perhaps going to the full report on a half-yearly basis.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm pretty keen on exception reporting. As my wife didn't realise it was going to be discussed, I'm actually quite keen on it. There's a huge amount of work to prepare what are very comprehensive financials, which we read the headlines and we look at the exceptions, but we generally don't look at anything else. So exception reporting I'd be very keen on.
Councillor Member?
It's just been thrown at us. So.
I know I just threw it, but it was...
Just through the chair, I suppose transparency for the community is quite important as well. We've got to make sure that we don't filter out what a lot of people do follow in terms of granular type of assessments of how we're performing. So there are some subjects that people watch through every financial report to keep tracking. So it's hard to differentiate between making an exception only and also providing regular updates on how we're performing. So I'll leave it to the financial experts to actually quantify what that would look like.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would appreciate that we could go down that route and be able to produce some really relevant information. We could look at a more dashboard effect for our reporting as well, that may bring in some of those other areas that the community do want to understand. And, there's no reason that things can't be fleshed out in discussion around the table. So it would be a big help to us to be able to do that.
But to maintain the detail, this is only my opinion, by the way, on at least on a half-yearly basis, which is pretty much the corporates do your half-yearlies. But again, this is just an idea. We could perhaps put it on the agenda to discuss at the next meeting, depending on how others feel about it. And we'd also need to decide what we considered were exceptions. If it's below 10% up, 10% below, a absolute figure of more than Y, areas of particular sensitivity and community interest and things like that. So is it possible to have a discussion paper for the next agenda?
Yeah.
So I'd like to move that if I have a seconder. So the motion is that we have a discussion paper for the next Audit Risk Committee meeting, looking at finding a compromise position around providing necessary detail versus balancing out the workload. Thank you.
I do like the sustainability report. I find that really reassuring and easy to understand.
I was just asked through the chair, the in relation to the audit, letter from the audit, regarding the audit, are they also looking at the procurement policy that is the subject of last year's angst?
Procurement is always part of audit, so that what they've detailed here is the specifics that they've been requested by the Audit Office of the Auditor General, and those are for all councils and not just for us. But they also always review procurement.
Yes, I didn't hear that when you said about the.
No, but these are specifics. Yeah.
Yes, I thought that given the issues that were around last year, that the Audit General might have had this as a special requirement to have a particular look at procurement policy.
I suspect that has been superseded because of the oversight committee.
There will, just through the chair, there will be, I suppose, areas of interest based on previous audits of council anyway that they go back and reassure themselves that they have been addressed. Each council would have a different flavour when it talks about those special interests. I think we've done a lot of work in the work with the oversight committee, and also prior to that with the proposed Crown Observer. So I'm very confident that we're in a very strong position and handle it all with no problem.
We have just received the interim audit management report, which will be brought to the next council meeting, and that actually was quite positive. And yeah, I think we're certainly improving.
If there's no further questions, I will now move that the Audit and Risk Committee receive the financial report. Your Worship.
The audit report, the audit planning report.
And the financial report, because I chopped that one last time.
Oh, did we not do it?
Yeah, because I've forgotten that we're going to back and look at the audit report. Yeah.
Sorry, who was the seconder?
His Worship. And I would now like to move that the Audit and Risk Committee move into the public excluded section of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting of the 6th of August, and also to advise that the meeting will be adjourned for 2 minutes while we adjust the live streaming and the Zoom